Hello. Yay, everybody made it to the other side. Hello, everyone tuning in. We'll give everybody a few minutes just to get in. So we'll go ahead and start with an icebreaker question today. So to the panel, what is the best meal that you've had recently?
Shall I go first? So let me think about this. So last week, had a really nice Japanese meal in San Francisco. So fairly new to the United States, and it was fantastic. I like Asian food in particular.
There's a lot of great Asian food in NorCal. Definitely no shortage.
Oh, yes.
Anil, good meal you had recently?
It was last week too. I went with my wife to one of our friends' restaurant in Burlingame, closer to SF. I'm in the Bay Area too. It's a place called Broadway Grill, and it was very innovative, American, with a little bit of few Lithuanian items. She's from Lithuania, so I was like, okay, that was a great experience for me. The place is nice. Had a great time.
Nice. To check that out. Jorge?
So mine's more like it was a combined day of just eating ice cream. So for Father's Day, I have a toddler, and for every meal and snack, we had ice cream. So
Wow.
that was great.
Awesome. That sounds really fun.
Father of the Year.
Or the same flavor?
No,
Cute.
different flavors, different places. We went all out. It was a thing.
Impressive.
I had a really good steak on Saturday evening at Henry's in SF. It was the fanciest meal I've had in a long time. It was very nice. Or actually,
Good.
Harris, I apologize. Harris Steakhouse. And on that note, we'll get started. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. Today we're here to talk about the art and science of high ROI comp plans with these awesome panelists. We're so excited about the amazing content and takeaways that y'all are going to get out of this event. And today's event, there we go, got the title up there. So today's event is brought to you by the wonderful team at MSP, at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we're the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, also known as our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not know about. So don't invent the wheel yourself. We got you covered. We do that through live sessions like this one, an online forum, quarterly summits, and we're starting to get back to in-person events as well. So if you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join after this event. And another great Modern Sales Pro event that we have coming up is our summit. If you'd like the content from today, you'll love our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit happening July 12th through the 14th. We pulled together 16 events with amazing content and speakers. Hear from the CEO of ZoomInfo, SalesLoft, Clary, and Winning by Design, as well as sales leaders at HubSpot, Dooley, Outreach, Atrium, and so many more. I'll drop the link into the chat so that you can go ahead and sign up for that. But enough about MSP. Today's session wouldn't be possible without our lovely sponsorship from Captivate IQ. So now I'm going to hand it over to Neil to say a few words on Captivate IQ. Anil?
Thanks, Roxy. So Captivate IQ is a modern solution for end-to-end commission process. It enables your revenue teams to essentially transform how your company leverages, administers, and optimizes commission plans. Well, we have customers, leading companies like Gong and Intercom are our customers, and we help them transform the commission process to achieve their revenue goals.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Sorry, just a little. Okay, great. And now I'm going to, thank you again, by the way, Neil. I'm going to go over some housekeeping slides before we go ahead and get started here. So for this event, it is being recorded. You'll be able to access the recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if you have a question for our panelists, please don't be shy. Use the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to get them during the event. Just go ahead and pop them in there as they come up. And now let's go ahead and introduce these wonderful panelists today. Jorge, I'll pass to you to introduce yourself, and I'll see you guys at the end. Take it away, Jorge.
All right. Thank you so much, Roxy, for that. My name is Jorge Estrada. I am a consultant focused around systemic transformation, targeting social change and impact initiatives. And I'm going to leave it to Mark and Anil to introduce themselves. So Mark, do you want to go and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep, Mark Kemp. I'm the VP of Customer Experience at CaptivateIQ. Recently joined the company, but I've been in the incentive compensation space for 22 years, mainly delivering solutions for customers, but also working in terms of helping customers get the most out of their incentive compensation plans. Originally from the UK, moved to Australia 7 years ago, so I'm a citizen of both countries, and recently relocated to the United States. And I've worked with customers big and small across multiple industries, all across the world.
Anil.
All right. Well, I first did my project sales compensation career started in 1995, so that would be 27 years. But I also took a little break, like Mark, and went back to India after being in the industry for 11 and a half years. Took a detour in the design field and some other consulting field, and came back to sales compensation about 5 years ago. And I currently focus on delivering solutions to our customers. That's what I did earlier on also. But in the past, I have helped companies design their plans. I have helped them optimize their plans. Hopefully, I can add some value to this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you both. Really appreciate that. I think what we're going to do today is a little something different. We're going to start off with a poll question based on some topics that we want to go through here. So Roxy, if you don't mind popping that up for the first topic, where we're going to talk about aligning incentives to business goals. And I just want to say that as a sales professional, the incentives tend to be a kind of a black box. So it's so nice to have two experts on the line that could tell us all about it. So thank you both.
So shall I go first?
All right. So this is an interactive. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no. I guess aligning incentives with business goals, there's a lot to unpack there. I guess one of the first things to highlight is that we all know that incentives drives behavior. So we need to make sure that when we're designing compensation plans, that we consider the unintended consequences that might result from them. I'm sure there's lots of people that are listening in right now who can point to examples in their organization of where the best intentions didn't always work out with the best outcomes or the best behaviors. So what I have tended to do over the years is to use a plan design framework where customers ask for advice over how they should design their incentive plans. And this plan design framework sort of breaks it down into a number of different logical steps. And it's all about trying to drive the best outcomes for your business. So this would include things like plan eligibility. Should it just be your sales organization, which has actually been driven by incentive compensation, or maybe it's broader roles? Over the years, I've seen that this has shifted from just pure sales to broader roles. Things like pay mix and total compensation. What the compensation types are, which is the reason why we put this poll out there, was to look at the spread of companies that are using compensation-based or commission-based versus goal-based incentives. Over the years, I've seen that it's shifted more towards goal-based incentives, so it'll be interesting to see how this comes out. And then, diving into things like compensation structure, crediting and payout timing, as well as the rules, the number of components you have on the plan, and use of other programs like KPIs. So there's a step-by-step guide that you can go through this incentive plan framework to design a plan, and at all stages try and consider what the best outcome is, as well as those unintended outcomes. I don't know, Anil, does that align with your background and experience?
Yes, it does. Also, the other thing is that essentially more and more companies now are not just tying the salesperson to their immediate impact. They are also considering measurements that are a little bit more downstream. including, things that may be related to profitability or margins or other things.
Agreed. And this is something that I think is important to consider as the economy is changing as well. So things like, do you pay up front or do you pay based on outcomes? So for example, one of the things that I've seen in the tech industry is that the shift from paying people upfront based on booking towards more outcome driven. So it might be that you have a held back percentage of the compensation, which is paid either on go live if there's some form of implementation, or maybe if there's another event, like for example cash collection might be something that's important to your business. So these are things that you would feed into what your business goals are and ensure that they're designed into the plan accordingly. So any other points you want to share, Anil?
No, that's it for now.
Okay. So we have got on the poll results, I think it was 55% approximately. So there's almost an even split of people on this call that are using commission-based with rates per transaction versus goal-based incentives, and nobody is using flexible objective-based non-financial components. So this is interesting that we see here. Although the results are still coming through, it's shifting a little bit more towards goal-based incentives. But nobody is using a non-financial metric. And as we go through this presentation, that's certainly something that I think I'm starting to see a little bit more, that there are roles inside of the organization that are being driven by compensation, which is more non-financial in nature. So things like customer satisfaction scores or NPS scores. So it's interesting that people are coming through with saying that they're not actually using these right now.
I'm curious as to that point. Are there certain non-financial incentives that you're seeing that have, at the end of the day, a financial component to them, and that's why they're being included in incentive plans, or is it just random? There's no really real logic behind it. I'm sure that's not the case, but curious.
Yeah, I think that the inclusion of these is a percentage of the overall incentive plan. So, obviously if it's straight sales that you're paying, then it would be skewed more towards, the booking and the sale component. But as you look at your overall business objectives and what you're trying to achieve, in a lot of cases, there are other roles inside of the organization, customer success roles, if it's in high tech, for example, where it might be driven based on outcomes that you want to achieve with the customer. And so, CSAT and NPS are things that would be a component of the plan. And I think that also is starting to work its way into, from what I've seen, into sales plans as well. So you're starting to see that from a sales perspective, what we're looking at is not just obviously securing the customer, but we want long-term customer value. And so things like non-financial objectives, customer sentiment is something that is starting to creep into some of these plans.
So in that case, you would think about customers that are renewing a contract, for example. If that's coming up, how satisfied they are, that would factor into them repeating themselves as a customer. So that makes a lot of sense. So it would take us, it's a good segue into the next topic, which is really figuring out if your sales comp plan is working. And I don't think a lot of people can answer that straight up or intelligently. So I'm curious to hear from you guys what you've seen are best practices or good signs that something is working well.
I think that this is a hard one. This has always been the holy grail. How do you know that what you're actually paying for, you're getting a return on your investment? And really what it comes down to is a lot of the drivers of what you're trying to achieve as a business. So if you're trying to achieve more revenue growth, then obviously that's one metric that you would look to measure. If you're shifting more towards margin, if the growth has kind of come out of your business and you're now trying to drive for higher margin from your customer base. That would be another metric. So it depends what your business goals are, and there's not a one size fits all. But I have seen examples of customers that are more systematic in the way they go about working out what their return on sales expense is. You know, if you think about it as a formula, then the return on sales expense is effectively the cost of your sales, whatever cost of sales you have, you know, as a function of the productivity of the sales team. Now, how do you define productivity? That comes down to your data and your metrics and what it is that you're actually trying to measure. And I think some companies that do it really well will use data to really drive the outcome and determine, is this changing month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, whatever your velocity of your business is, to determine whether the changes that you're making are actually having an impact. One point I would add here as well is that line of sight is key. So in a sales compensation plan, people will often ask me as well, how many components should I have? How many components is the right number? And I've seen plans that have 20, 30 components. I'm sure, Neil, you'll probably share the same view, that we've had lots of plans that have many different metrics. It's almost impossible for the person that's on that plan to know where they should be focusing their effort. So my general rule of thumb is 3. 3 is the magic number. If you have more than 3, probably too complicated. If you have less than 3, maybe you're not maximizing the opportunities that you get from different incentive levers. Anil, you agree?
Yeah. So, well, I'll get to the point about number of components in a bit, but to the point of how to measure the effectiveness of plan, I'd like to add a couple of things. So, you know, what you mentioned is an aggregate revenue level effectiveness. You know, am I earning the money that I'm investing in the sales comp plan? And the outcomes that you're mentioning actually could be outcomes that are just non-direct revenue impact immediately. Like, for example, if you wanted to enter a strategic market, you know, grow your business in a particular segment, then you need to look at the growth in that segment, not just the number of revenue, but, you know, number of customers, different variables. So the idea is that when you design the plan, what drivers you have should become the drivers that you analyze it based on afterwards, right? So if you put that component in there to drive a certain behavior, which is, hey, I want to, you know, have a certain product mix, I want to grow these newer products, or I want to penetrate these specific customer segments, then after the fact, you want to analyze how you did against that when you pay the money in terms of commissions and the rewards. And if the company is achieving its goal while people get paid on their compensation plan. The second point about number of measurements is, yes, 3 is the ideal number. At the same time, sales processes are getting complex. Business processes are getting complex. And a sales guy can never afford to be like this, you know, I can't handle complexity kind of person. So I've seen customers have, you know, up to 5 usually. Of course, we're not talking about 20 components when it makes sense. And some customers are not afraid of adding that complexity because they're trying to reflect the complexity in their business. And you know, there's always a hard trade-off between simplicity and alignment with what the job is. So if the job is complex, you're dealing with various segments, and, you know, there's a whole lot of strategy and how you're supposed to do it. The complexity is already baked in, whether you have it in the plan or not.
Yeah, and I would add to that I think certain industries have high levels of complexity because of their go-to-market strategy. So if you're using not just a direct sales channel, if you've got an indirect sales channel, for example, as well, or some form of overlay structure, maybe you have multiple products that you're selling, therefore you need to have an overlay sales structure as well. That's where the complexity lies. And it comes back to that plan framework that I described at the start. You need to sit down and work out what all of your roles are and what the objectives are for each of these roles, and consider the unintended consequences, because you want to make sure that people are working together to achieve the right outcomes for your business, rather than working individually to maximize their own personal payout. just a comment I would make there. So, okay, would now be the right time to push out the second poll?
I think so. Roxy, you want to take it away?
Okay. So on this poll, what we're looking to see is what metrics you're actually using to work out what the productivity of your sales team is. Are you, looking at revenue in the current year, growth? That could be year on year, quarter on quarter. Obviously, margin, sales bookings, new customer acquisition. So actually defining a new logo as something that you want to achieve. And then other will be anything that's a catch-all that we haven't put here at the bottom. And it will be interesting to see what the outcome is. I think that this is a little bit skewed because it will be aligned to what the customer's particular industry is, whereas certain industries are driven by things like revenue in current year or revenue growth, where more mature markets might be looking at customer retention and margin. So I think that some of the statistics needs to be taken into account with the audience that we have here, but it will be interesting to see what the outcome is. Anil, what have you seen with your recent customer engagements in terms of the types of metrics that you're seeing being measured?
Well, most of the customers look at both new business and renewals, if you're talking about software and so basically they're trying to always balance between new customer acquisition and more value is being placed on retention of customers because they understand that the cost of sales is very high and salespeople can no longer just focus on getting the customer. The organization has to retain the customer. So there's a whole lot of emphasis shifting on those pieces in terms of plans and plan component, which wasn't there probably a decade ago, I think.
And in the high tech industry, one area that I see as an interesting trend is that paying for things like revenue in current year is based on a hard dollar outcome. Whereas if you look at the sales structure where there's been more of a shift towards SDRs and BDRs in recent years, there's a lot more emphasis being placed on that side of the business in terms of generating pipeline, generating demand. One of the trends that I've seen is that, or observations that I've seen is that some customers will pay for effort, pay based on effort. So it might be, hey, number of meetings that you're setting up, or number of quality conversations, for example, versus other companies that pay based on outcomes. And that might be qualified opportunities, or even opportunities turning into close one business. And so the mix of these different things is really important, and it depends what it is that you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to achieve volume, or are you trying to achieve like high quality outcomes? I don't know whether that's something that you've seen as well in some of the plans that you've been working on recently.
Yeah, interestingly, a lot of BDRs have a component now that is based on the opportunity value, not just the activity number. Like, hey, how many meetings did you do? How many demos did you do? How many, whatever events did you do? But also how many, of course, also the number of qualified leads that you pass on, which are just quantitative, like unit size, right? Like, 1, 2, 3. But they are also getting paid based on the business generated eventually. So that what that does is essentially, and I like that idea because what it does is it makes the BDR be aware of the quality of customer they are really finding. They're not just filling the funnel with customers, who may not end up converting or may not end up converting into a higher value for the company.
Absolutely. And so I'm looking at the poll that is coming through here, and it's a pretty even spread, which is interesting. And I think this just goes to show that the great thing about sales incentives is that there's many different ways to do it. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever is right for your business. And so, there are lots of different options that are available to customers. It's a question of sitting down and working out the pros and cons of each of them, and as I say, the intended and unintended behaviors that's going to drive. seems like sales bookings and new customer acquisition is coming through as the highest, with less customers or less people on this call looking at margin. So it'll be interesting to see in 12 months' time if there's a shift, because if the economy doesn't improve, as I hope I'm sure everybody on this call is hoping that it will do in the latter half of this year. If it doesn't improve, then you might find that actually new customers are harder to come by. So therefore, preserving the customers that you have and trying to upsell within that customer base might be something that's more attractive to customers, and driving higher margins. Maybe interesting.
One quick question that I had for you too. In recent years, there's been a lot of people that have been shifting jobs, especially around sales. And typically, you're not going to start producing right away when you go to a completely different company. It might be the same field. Are there any innovative comp plans that you guys are seeing that take an employee's journey and make it feasible for, let's say, for them to stick around for a couple of years and make sure that the investment that the company puts into hiring somebody really becomes fruitful on both ends?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think the first comment I would make is that it's easier to retain people than it is to hire new people and ramp them up. So retaining people is where I certainly am seeing that there's a greater emphasis, and compensation is a great lever for that. So looking at, the reasons why people are leaving, if it's related to compensation, it could be that they don't trust the process. They don't feel that there's enough transparency or clarity in the process. This is where automation and tools can come into their own in terms of being able to allow you to communicate effectively out to the salespeople, so that they do have trust in the process. I think also the ability to have data and analytics to drill into the reasons why people are leaving is absolutely key. But the onboarding of new salespeople, I mean, there's lots of different levers that you can pull. Guarantees that you can put in place, draws, recoverable and non-recoverable. And I think it really comes down to what type of individual you're looking to hire. If you're hiring a seasoned salesperson, then obviously you would want to put in place something that allows them to be able to get up to speed with your products quickly. If it's more junior, then they might want to consider other options for how you ramp them up. I don't know, Anil, have you got anything else that you wanted to add into that?
So the first thing is to comment on Jorge's initial question about, even roughly mentioning 2 years. Nobody goes beyond a quarter nowadays in terms of ramp time. You just don't get that kind of leeway in the sales world. You may have a little bit more than a quarter, but basically everybody is designing their organization, their go-to-market strategy, all of their technology stack, support systems, whatever you want to call it, marketing, media, the content, everything, so that the person can be productive immediately. So then we're really talking about what do you do with the plans for 3 months? And pretty much everybody is using some form of guarantee to say, okay, first 3 months, you get this much money, and if you make more, you keep more, and things like that. But a lot of this is more enablement than plan accommodating the person beyond a certain point.
Yeah, I think that the working from home 100% has made it slightly more difficult as well. Ramping people up and bringing salespeople and getting them up to speed, it requires a little bit more focused attention. And now that we're able to travel a little bit more, I think that what we're going to see is those onboarding processes are going to have more of an on-site component. We had a whole team of BDRs in the office last week, and it was really energizing to see. And getting back to that kind of balance of in-person versus virtual, I think is what we're going to see over the next 12 months. And I think that really helps in terms of ramping people up and communicating to them and getting them to understand what is it that you really want them to be doing, and aligning their compensation plan so that they can drive their behaviors to make sure that they do the right thing by the company and also maximize their personal payout as well.
Excellent. So we've talked a little bit about what companies are considering in their incentive plans, what you're seeing. Sorry, did you have a comment? Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is a perfect segue into the next topic, which is what people are not considering that they should. I'm really curious about this one because I always think about what if we should put something into the plan that shouldn't be in there, and am I making a mistake? So I want to hear from you guys as the experts. What are some things that people should be measuring that they're not?
Yeah, look, this is an interesting one. This is, and I've touched upon this a little bit, but I think that it comes down to the things that people are not putting in their plans would be things like financial metrics, margin, profitability, cash collection. I think we saw some of that coming through in the poll. Customer outcomes. This would be CSAT, NPS, or even the holy grail would be is if you could pay based on the customer's return on investment. So if the customer puts a business case together for your product, acquires it, and their return on investment is high, then this should be something that should be driving potentially the incentive of the person that actually sold it in the first place because they did a great job. I don't know. Some other things would be like KPIs, softer metrics, as I mentioned before, product mix. So there's things that I'm seeing that are coming in, but they're certainly not used across the board. I think that those are things that people may want to consider using a little bit more. I don't know whether you'd echo that sentiment, Anil.
Yeah, I do. Essentially, people are aligning their plans more and more with the value of the business and as it happens to the company. So it's not like you sold it and you get paid, and then we are responsible to make sure the customer was profitable, whether the customer you got is, going to be a longer term value or not. So the bottom line is salespeople do know the kind of customer they're bringing in. They do know which customer is going to work for the company better or not. And it's better to align your plans to that. Otherwise, they'll game the system and just get numbers that help them, but numbers that don't help us, the company.
Yeah. So we have a poll that I think we could launch at this stage just to see what the audience is thinking about some of these things. So maybe we should launch our final poll. Okay, so which of these metrics are you not currently using in your incentive plan that you would consider using? Be interesting to see what people think. Should probably have added another in there, but it'll be interesting to see what comes back out.
Again, what is the metric you think is missing from the choices?
Well, I was just thinking about if other people in the audience have some other ideas of metrics that are not on this list here. Be interesting to see, but okay. So there seems to be some percentage here that's shifting towards customer outcome, customer satisfaction, or ROI. Seems to be in the lead here, and that doesn't surprise me. I mean, more and more, it becomes increasingly important to make sure that we get a customer for life, that we're selling good business, that when we're generating business for our company, that we can actually maximize it. And that could be in multiple different ways. That could be cross-sell opportunities from the studies that I've seen. It's about 5 times easier to cross-sell within an existing customer than it is to acquire a net new customer logo, where you've already got relationships established and you have a track record. It's much easier to sell other products and services into that customer. So renewal rates, retention, customer satisfaction, these are all things that I think are going to become increasingly more important over the years, especially in a situation where it might be harder to come by new customers. I think you're going to see that increasing. Anil, what do you make?
I just realized that adding measurements like customer satisfaction and net promoter scores, since I'm in professional services, I like that idea. And the reason is that way the salespeople can't overpromise and have a dissatisfied customer in the sales process just to get the customer. And that's where the whole equation lies, which is what value proposition are you bringing to the customer? And you're not just selling a customer, you are actually creating a great relationship that leads into positive outcomes, whether it is CSAT, Net Promoter Score, or any of these things, and hence, of course, profitable business for us in the long run. But yeah, I mean, we often run into situations in professional services, if you want to call us that, where we are like, oh, you sold them that, you promised them that, and I have to deliver it now, So you want to make sure that they're motivated to bring in the business the right way.
Yeah. And I think that how you go about this is, that these components here could be, or these element metrics could be part of one of the components. So if it's a revenue-based quota component, for example, you could have a percentage of that that's on booking or on some other kind of trigger point once the deal has been sold, and then a percentage of that which is held back based on the customer go live, customer ROI in this case, or some kind of post-implementation customer survey, if there is an implementation that is part of your product setup. Or it could be that this is just a separate component. I don't know.
Well, usually holdbacks work really well. And historically, customers have avoided doing those things because of the complexity of managing the solution. So this is, even though they want it from a perspective of alignment and, doing the right thing for the business, they're often scared about managing the complexity that comes with the time aspect of, when a particular transaction gets paid. And, well, you just have to figure out technology and solution and team for that instead of compromising on your plan alignment, I would say. Yeah, but historically, that's been a big reason when they're trying to simplify the plan to the point where it's manageable.
Yeah, and that's where automation comes in. So the ability to be able to obtain data to drive these outcomes or measure against these outcomes is absolutely critical. And yeah, it can be challenging for some companies. Larger companies tend to find it a little bit more difficult than smaller companies. But you're absolutely right. And that's certainly one of the things that I've observed over the 20 plus years is that it's all about the data, the ability to have the data and to be able to measure is something that's key, because it gives you the flexibility to be able to make changes. If you find that something's not working and you need to course correct, if it's not customer satisfaction, if that's driving the wrong behaviors, if there's something that is a bad outcome, the ability to be able to pivot. So the data is critical to anything that you do.
Interesting. So we kind of went over what to consider, how to structure your incentive plan so it makes sense, what makes sense to put in it, what doesn't. So I'm curious if you guys, just not to put you on the spot, but where you guys work, if you could kind of walk us through, what the business goals are, not sharing anything confidential, obviously, and how that compensation plan is structured, just to give the audience an example of how someone thinks about things in the way that you guys are presenting.
Emil, do you want to take that one first?
I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah, I'm sure I fully understand.
So I assume, well, it all starts with the go-to-market strategy, right? And you have segments, you have customers, you have product mix, and you start flowing down rows. If that's your question as to how the whole flow of the alignment, is that the question? Okay.
Yeah, I was looking for an example and using the company that you guys work at as an example. How is that compensation plan structured?
Okay. So an example is, let's take a BDR plan, right? And BDRs have historically been paid, sales historically has been having the attitude of, activity. Managers want to make sure that you're just on the phone, you're knocking on the doors, as a BDR, and I want to measure, how many, calls did you make? How many demos did you have? Things like that, right? That is starting to shift because what they're saying is the outcomes are more important, for example. And that's where I was giving an example earlier of saying, the BDR does have influence on which customers they pay more attention to, and with quality of the customers that they bring in, because everybody's not the same. And hence I am now going to pay them on further downstream things, and I'm going to align their behavior to the outcomes I want, which is, hey, the value of the opportunity. Not, when it closes, you get paid on that. Now that may happen months, 3 months, 6 months after a BDR does his job or her job, right? But they get paid on that. So more and more alignment is happening on a longer term. Less and less people are being pampered to say, okay, you do your job and you move on. So there's a lot more integration, in the sense, and overlap like this between plans of BDRs, sales reps, CSMs. They kind of like all carry components across. And because it's a team that's aligned to achieve certain go-to-market goals. And in this particular case, one example I have of a customer is like where they basically had 4 components for the BDR activity, getting certain cash immediately, stage 1, stage 2 type of thing. Like, when the deal reaches a certain stage, you get some more money. And then when the opportunity comes in, the value of the opportunity gives you more money. So they're not afraid to say that your payments are staggered based because our results are staggered, and aligning it that way.
And I think that's a shift that we've certainly seen, because historically it would all be paid up front. You give the BDR the money based on activity, because you want to keep them excited, keep them energized, give them some reward for the work that they're doing as early as possible. But the reality is that the quality of the output and the customer conversion rate and the long-term lifetime value that you derive from that customer is absolutely important. So I think that visibility and that communication back into the early stage of the sales process is starting to happen. And so it's becoming more commonplace now that you see things like that. I would just add as well that there is, in our case, there is, obviously different types of customers that you go after. So that might be selling to large customers versus smaller customers. And so the sales motion is different for different customer segments. And so the compensation plans obviously need to reflect that as well. You might have some sales cycles that are very short. And so therefore, you can have an incentive plan that's designed for that versus a longer sales cycle. If you're selling into enterprise customers, it might take 6 months, to actually start and then close a deal. And so that requires a different way of thinking about the incentive plan, because usually those types of deals, they take a village. You might have an SE, you might have a CSM involved in it, professional services. There'll be, a lot of different types of folks that are involved. And so making sure that they're all working together and that the plans are aligned across those different groups, I think is really key. So you don't have people working to their own benefit rather than the benefit of the company, which is winning the customer in the right way.
Excellent. And I want to encourage the audience to input their questions. I think we have a few in here that for you guys to answer. So the first question is, how much importance should be given to simplicity and understandability of the incentive plan? And should that be a prime driver?
Neil, do you want to take that one first?
Okay. Well, the prime driver is definitely alignment and the business goals. But yes, simplicity. So the way I look at it, it's like you first design a plan which is best aligned to your goals, and then you look at what unnecessary complexity you have in there, and you kind of pare it down after that. So you don't want to be nitpicky, and you don't want to add too many pieces that are not critical. So you can but you do need to start with your alignment. Also, simplicity in general can also be addressed through better communication, better training. You don't need to dumb down things. You can smart up your salespeople in a way to say that, in terms of understanding, what the metrics are that is driving your business. You can't. That's your nature of your business. Having said all of that, at the end, you do want to minimize complexity in the plan, but it can't be the prime driver.
Yeah, I'd say that line of sight is absolutely key. Whatever incentive plan that you have is the person that, or the role needs to be able to see, how do I get from where I am right now to where the plan is trying to get me to be. So what do I need to achieve, whether that's selling X net new logos or revenue or whatever the metric is that you're using to pay people. They need to be able to observe that line of sight and see how they can get there. And if you think about quota-based plans, then it becomes, okay, well, how am I going to achieve that quota? If I need to achieve a certain percentage of that before I even get paid out, versus, do I get paid on everything that I sell up until I achieve my quota and then I go into accelerators? The first thing that somebody's going to do is they're going to sit down and work out, how do I achieve that goal? So you need to make sure that that is aligned to the right outcome that you're trying to achieve. So if you want to make sure that the plan is, so what you're trying to do is make sure that the plan is achievable, so that they don't look at it and think that's just way too hard, I'm not even going to try. But you want to make it challenging enough that they need to work hard to get to the point at which you're actually paying them the money that the plan is paying out. So setting quotas, setting targets, setting thresholds, whatever they are, it needs to be based on data, based on prior history, based on things that you believe are achievable, but maybe a slight stretch goal.
Also, a lot of complexity can be addressed by proper communication. If you have a good design of a plan statement, which explains exactly how the math is done, how it works, plus you give them an ability to see the impact of every new deal that comes in, like a what if calculator or something else, then the understandability is going to go high. Every time you make a payment, they are understanding the system better and better if you have good communication design. So the statement design and the communication and all the tools that they have available to look at their data and their results are critically important to kind of creating understanding, right? So even if some of the concepts are difficult, but if with proper communication, they can be made understandable.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're almost out of time, and I want to give you both a chance to give us your key takeaways. And everything that you guys have said is so important. So, but there's 2 or 3 things that you'd like the audience to take away from this conversation in the last minute or so. Mark, you want to take it away?
Yeah, look, I think, I'll come back to data. So it's all about ensuring that you have the right data available within whatever process your plan that you define, to be able to ensure that you can actually automate that process, communicate it, and make sure that it's clear and understandable for whoever is on that plan, to ensure that their motivation, their behaviors are aligned to the right outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So in my experience, the data is absolutely the key. They need to trust that data. They need to trust the process, and they need to ensure that it's absolutely crystal clear what is expected of them to achieve the outcomes that you're trying to drive.
I'll add to that. Of course, data is important. Without data, you can't design any plan. And then I'll go further, which is not being afraid to align the plan to the outcomes, essentially, not just, initial activity, not just the sales value, but the value of the customer in the long run to the organization, whether it's through measurements like margins, profitability, invoice collection, things like that. So essentially making them more aligned to the longer term outcomes for the organization, rather than just, necessarily the booking activity itself. And then, adding a lot of communication and good information to help them understand and keep their motivation high with the plans.
Excellent. That sounds really good. I really appreciate you both jumping in here and letting us know what's going on with within your world. Roxy, want to take it away?
Hello, everyone, again. Yeah, right before we close this out, too, there's one more question in the chat that I want to hit. It's, how often do you think a plan should be changed to accommodate for business changes? And I'm going to add to that, too, especially given today's economic standing. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I think the ability to be able to change based on any kind of business changes, it shouldn't be like an annual plan change or a 6 monthly plan change. I think your plan design should be flexible enough that it should be able to accommodate any business changes within reason, of course. I think what we tend to see is that companies will do an annual refresh of their plan. They might change the construct, add in a new metric, change a metric. But during the year, you need the ability to be able to change as quickly as the business is changing. And that might be, we'll take an example when the pandemic hit. Almost overnight, every company looked at their compensation plans and said, what do I need to do now? Well, nobody knew what the outcome was going to be, but what happened across the board was people were taking a look at quotas, targets, and saying, should we be changing these? Should we give some quota relief because we now think that everybody's going to be working from home? So the ability to have that flexibility, not only in the plan construct, but also in the tool that you use, is really critical.
I'll pretty much second that. And I've seen customers design plans that don't have an annual, set goals. They refresh the goals, let's say quarterly, because they know the nature of their business is more volatile. And they may have some additional annual pieces, but essentially they design for the volatility they expect in their business outside of what happens to everybody through pandemic or something like that. So yes, you can structurally design for your plans to have that built-in agility, I guess.
Guess we're trying to structure everything to have that now, huh? Getting ready to pivot for different things. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, guys. So we're going to wrap things up here. First, just want to say thank you so much for Captivate IQ for sponsoring this. They're doing great things over there. So everybody, please go over and check them out. The recordings and key takeaways will be available on our site shortly after this. And a big thank you so much to Anil, Mark, and Jorge. I appreciate y'all so very